I think every security leader out here is going to shoot me for saying this.
What's your gut telling you?
This sounds all too familiar. I think the biggest mistake is thinking that by cutting their single sign-on, it cuts all access.
Your VP of product sends you a Slack message.
What? Is this the Silicon Valley episode?
Hi, I'm Khush Kashyap, Senior Director of GRC at Vanta. I'm your host today at the Tabletop. Today I'm joined by Will Bengtson. Will has spent his career at the intersection of security and engineering. He has built and secured cloud infrastructure at Netflix and Capital One, led platform and security engineering at HashiCorp, and previously a cybersecurity lecturer at UT El Paso. Will is now CISO at C1, the AI native identity platform. But today, Will's in the hot seat playing CISO at Cendril. Will, here are the rules. You're now the CISO at Cendril. It's a 500 people, fast scaling company that runs a hot AI native platform. A scenario will unfold with multiple injects. You will give your live reaction. At the end, you'll decide, is this a real incident or is it fiction? Will, are you ready for the tabletop?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
It's 4:47 p.m. on a Friday, and it's the last working day for Jordan Reeves. Jordan is a highly respected and model principal AI engineer who's been with the company from its earliest days. Jordan's been professional throughout the whole transition. He gave his 2 weeks notice, put together thorough handoff docs, sent a goodbye post on Slack to all of his peers, etc. Did all of it. But at 5:12 p.m., your DLP system flags an alert. You notice that an unusually large volume of files have been transferred to a personal Dropbox account from Jordan's work laptop in the last 40 minutes of his last day. What's your gut telling you?
This sounds all too familiar. As you were presenting the scenario, I was like, I know where this is going, which is always kind of funny. And I think every security leader out here is going to shoot me for saying this or get really upset. Is like, I don't know why people wait until the last day or the last 2 weeks to start taking the data if they're going to take it all at once. But I think instantly it's like, doesn't surprise me. I've seen it before, last week, starting to take some things, whether it's malicious or not. They want to take their portfolio or something that they can use to either remember what they've done or use it to present forward for the next gig, right? And so, instantly I would say, okay, let's take a look and see what it is. Do some analysis. Let's first make sure that the access is cut. Should it have been cut at 5? What could we improve in the beginning? But first, just making sure that we can cut off anything else so that 1, the DLP alerts stop. 2, we can start figuring out, okay, what's next? We need to get legal involved. We need to start issuing a stop order or like a legal notice to him. Is he in office? Is he still there? Are they a remote employee? I think there's a lot of situations that, I'd be asking the team, all right, where are we?
I like where your gut is heading. So the first inject, your security team jumps into action. They pull the full log. A transfer of 14 gigabytes started at 4:29 p.m. The files included 3 folders your team considers highly sensitive. One folder includes the architecture specs of a feature called Project Helix, which is still in stealth development and not scheduled for release for another 6 months. One folder has internal QA test suites. And the last one includes a customer segmentation model your data team built over the last 18 months. Jordan's access was still live at the time of transfer. His laptop had not been wiped yet. HR formally terminated his account at 5:30 p.m., 18 minutes after the DLP alert fired. What do you do within the next 1 hour?
I think within the next 1 hour, it'd be verifying that access has truly been cut off. Has the laptop truly been locked? A lot of people say, oh, let's cut Okta, let's cut Google access, and not realizing that it still keeps quite a broad set of access out there. Notion session might still be active, Slack session might be active. What do we have? Are we so small that we don't have grid yet, so that we don't have the ability to, when the SSO goes dead, that Slack goes deactive, and just really start thinking, okay, do we have our bases covered there? And then I think from then start digging into, okay, let's do some deeper analysis of the data. How bad is this? Do we think it's malicious? Working with the people team to understand, is Jordan going to a competitor? Is this going to be a Waymo, Uber type scenario, right? Do we need to get legal involved right away? I think initially it would be letting the co-founders know. Since Jordan's been there from the beginning, likely close confidant of them, can they call him to understand what is going on? It kind of reminds me of the Log4j. Everyone spent hours patching the first patch, and then they're like, just kidding, that didn't actually work. Everyone had to do it again. I don't want teams to have to spend that much time, especially going into a weekend, redoing analysis.
You talked a little bit about the people process side going wrong there. The DLP alert fired 18 minutes before offboarding was done. What does that gap tell you about your process?
Typically, if the process says terminate employee at 5, I think it doesn't say anything about a gap. I think if we think about a typical last day of an employee, are they really working at the end of the day? And so maybe the gap in the process is, should critical systems be cut off much sooner? And so should Jordan still have access to those critical components on their last day of work? And should that have potentially been cut off a week prior, one day before, which could potentially have said, okay, well, you can still access your payroll and things like that you might want to download some of your pay stubs for, maybe you're buying a house or whatever you might need for the next role, but not necessarily have access to the secret sauce, right? It all depends on the various different shapes of the company and what technologies are in play. Is any sort of local compute allowed, or is everything in the cloud? And so what kind of controls could you actually do? Or maybe, at previous companies, we put in like heightened alerts on people on their last 2 weeks. So if they were actually giving notice for being terminated, that's when new DLP rules went into effect. And which is kind of to my point earlier, it's always kind of funny when the last 2 weeks, that's when things happen, right? A month before downloading, 20 Git repos might not be a flag, but on your last 2 weeks, when it's not typical, that's flagged. So those would be the kind of things that I'd be jotting down to think about, okay, could we improve this in the future? Kind of should they still have access to these things at the very end?
Jordan is technically no longer an employee. Do you try to reach him directly, or does that create legal exposure before you know what you're dealing with?
I think it depends on how confident we are in what data they have in the beginning. As I mentioned earlier, being an early employee there for all along likely has really good relations with the co-founders, perhaps worked with them many companies before that. And so I think it's like, okay, let's, maybe it's CEO, whoever it is, can you reach out to Jordan and just ask like, hey, was this malicious? What is the intent? But I think it depends also, do we have internal legal? Do we have to go to outside legal counsel? If it's outside legal counsel on a Friday, are they in the same time zone? Are they still working? Can we get hold of them? I think there's a lot of potential, what if, let's see how the stars align. In previous scenarios where we've had this happen, we've reached out to them personally. The person just agreed that, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do this, or didn't think anything of it when I was doing it. Obviously, they meant to do it because they did the downloading themselves, but we followed up with a legal letter to them and then asked them to send the drive in that they downloaded it to. In the case of that one, it was a USB drive, and then we destructively destroyed the data at that point, so we can kind of check our boxes to say they sent the data in. In the case of cloud days, what was uploaded to a Dropbox or a Google Drive or something, there's only things but them to sign like an attestation form that yes, I did comply with your order. I would believe at this point that the relationship is there with the CEO or CTO or who's some early employee that we could kind of get a feel and ask them. Otherwise, I think there obviously should be some sort of legal letter mailed, regardless of if like, hey, Jordan's my good friend, I trust him completely, just to cover the bases. In the future, I'd be pushing for legal to send some sort of notice.
So let's set the stakes. You have got the alert, the file list, and the 14 gigabytes now sitting in a personal Dropbox you have zero control over. Jordan's been off the clock under an hour. Do you either go loud, have legal fire off a preservation and return demand tonight, which means you have tipped Jordan off, and if this was an innocent portfolio grab, you have declared almost like a war on a beloved engineer over the weekend? Or do you go quiet, lock your own logs, image the laptop, build the picture before you ever contact Jordan, knowing that every hour you wait, you can empty that Dropbox and you're left with nothing?
Interesting. So I can only get choose one? I think from a security scenario, we're likely pushing towards, let's just image the laptop, let's make sure we capture our evidence, and we can actually, do we have CrowdStrike or something that can actually show the data flowing? Or is it Netscope or something that's actually, what is the DLP that actually flagged the alert? Make sure we have those logs captured, documented. So if there is a case in the future, and like Uber Waymo, we have everything that we could bring forward to show that this person stole the data, and that data is very close to what we're seeing now, and then potentially follow up.
So here is your second inject. Let's speed forward a bit. 6 weeks pass. Your team has been monitoring quietly. Then at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, your VP of product sends you a Slack message. It has a screenshot and 4 dreaded words. Did you see this? It turns out that Ascendant AI, your direct competitor, just announced a new feature. Their blog describes a capability that maps almost exactly to your Project Helix. It has the same technical approach, same UX framing, and 2 of the same edge case handling decisions your engineers made during internal design reviews. You don't have proof that Jordan shared anything. You do have a DLP alert and a competitor product release that looks like, let's be honest, wild coincidence. Then your most junior analyst flags something nobody wants to hear. Ascendant filed a patent application 8 months ago, before Jordan ever gave notice, describing this exact approach at a very high level. The broad strokes are arguably already theirs, but the patent doesn't mention the 2 edge case decisions your engineers made in internal review, and those match exactly. Your engineering leadership is furious, your CEO wants to brief the board this week, your legal team wants to know if this rises to litigation. What do you do, and what do you say to each of them?
I think, given that 8 months ago, probably is a long time of work. Perhaps Jordan is being wooed by a said competitor, maybe putting feelers out and interviewing, talking about things, violating non-disclosures and privacy agreements that he's had with our company. It is coincidental. So it'd be really like, do we really think that data was verbally communicated at a high level, which allowed them to do the patent? I'd probably want to go look and see, was there any previous indication that other data was taken, whether it was that big of a time? And if that was the case, why would Jordan take it at the end? If we're like 1-2 in the space, my guess is the board is going to push for a legal notice and action just to cover them, and that's what the investors are going to want. Meanwhile, we'd be trying to figure out, okay, is there any other evidence that we could point to say, yes, this is highly coincidental, and it's just unfortunate that we've been spending this much time, they have as well. And I think it depends on what the evidence we're pointing based on, from a security standpoint, what we'd be doing. But I think ultimately it'd be, okay, what is the CEO's approach?
Yeah.
Do we double down and say, okay, who cares? We still have the better company, the better tech. We have I can't remember if you said the 2 edge cases weren't met in the patent that we've done.
They were not. They were
and so
not
we still have that
included in the patent.
advantage
Yeah.
over them.
Yeah.
Which is enough probably to make that patent unenforceable, working with their comps team and PR to try to figure out what is the shape that we actually want to take, because that will affect us in the future for recruitment and a bunch of other things. And so unless we have really hard evidence, should we just double down and become the better company? Write it off as a loss. I'd be looking at those and giving those as my recommendation. Here are the scenarios that I'd lay out for them and give the board, all right, what are your options? What are you going to do?
I like that. I really like the grounded approach as a CISO that you're taking towards each of the stakeholders and what's motivating them or what's keeping them behind, etc. I do have a few follow-ups on certain stakeholder tangents here. So let's first talk about the legal ones. Your legal team asks whether you have enough to pursue a civil claim. What evidence do you actually have right now, and what do you still need?
We definitely have the evidence of the last day of work, the 14 gigs downloaded and what those contained. Would likely have already requested, depending on if we had the ability, or if we assume we're using Slack or Teams or something, whether we have the ability to go do an e-discovery on everything Jordan did, so we can actually understand what else they access or we're talking to others about, where maybe that could lead to some other evidence to support that. And then based on that, come back to the legal team and say, here's what we have. I'm not the lawyer, so I can't tell you whether we have enough for a civil case, but you can decide, right?
So what I'm hearing is definitely go beyond the DLP alert and the logs that you have there and start looking into communications with their peers and anything else that you find on the internet, any other leaks, etc.
So I think if I was Jordan's defense If it did come to something, it'd be like, what evidence do you have to point that no one else did this, right? Yeah. And were you just so focused on Jordan being the person that you were so blinded by, Michelle over there, or Steve, and they were actually the ones that were doing the thing.
Second stakeholder I want to ask you about is the VP of product. The VP of product wants to go nuclear and call out the feature similarity on LinkedIn publicly. How do you calm them down?
I think it's almost one of those like challenge scenarios for the VP of product. It's like, look, were these your best ideas? Can we do better? And try to get them not to focus on the past and focus on the future of how do we get better? How do we make it so that in the future, they can't catch up to us? So I'd really be pressing the product person to really just, hey, let's take a deep breath, step back, let's get in a room and strategize, get some other people, and let's start talking about it and lay out the different scenarios, do a tabletop, right? And say, okay, if this is truly the only thing that will make us successful, then let's figure out the right way to show how we did it first. I think the last thing I would want as an executive on this company is for one situation handled poorly to turn a lot of people against us, because that'll affect recruiting, image, everything in the future.
Let's go on our Inject 3.
Okay.
So if your team wasn't fired up before, now they are.
Oh boy.
Jordan's LinkedIn profile has been updated. He is now listed as a principal engineer at Ascendant AI, and he started 3 weeks ago. Your legal term has identified these 3 paths. One is send a cease and desist to Jordan and Ascendant AI. It signals you are serious, but it could go public fast and may spook your customers before you have controlled the narrative. Option 2, file a civil suit immediately. It's aggressive, expensive, and a long road. And let's be honest, your evidence is still circumstantial, to your point as well. Option 3 is investigate further, document everything, wait for a clearer picture before acting externally. That option buys time, but risks Ascendant AI shipping a second feature before you move. Which path do you decide to take?
Immediately I like option 3 better, because it's, okay, let's really just slow our roll. I'd really be wanting to make sure we had an open and shut case before really pushing forward.
One stakeholder that we haven't talked about before is the CEO. So Jordan has said nothing publicly. Ascendant AI has said nothing publicly either. But your CEO tells you, I don't care if we win. I care that every engineer thinking about leaving sees that we fight. How do you answer when business strategy is steering a legal call?
Yeah, I think I kind of point back to the similar strategy I'd have with the product person. It's like, look, could we not do better? And I think it's really rallying the troops, right? It's really, do you think what we shipped is the best, and us fighting is going to change that outcome? Why don't we put the energy into making the product better, adding new features, new advancement, new secret sauce that is going to further set us apart and prove that Jordan wasn't the secret sauce that kept us or got us to where we are today, really? I'd hate for something like this to really poison the culture, especially you're in probably a hyper growth phase. You obviously don't want attrition, but I'd really be focusing on, okay, hey, how can we use this positively and really focus on almost like attaboy, the whole feed the egos of the engineers and show them and prove to them that, hey, this is what got us to where we are today. This is why they're copying us, because obviously we're doing it the best. We can do more and greater things and figure out how do we leverage Tiger teams or whatever to get to the next step.
Let's fast forward and let's take the temperature down a bit. Fast forward 3 months, legal proceedings are underway. Your access management policy has been overhauled. DLP alerts now route in real time. Looking back at the full arc, the trusted engineer, the last day transfer, the competitor feature, what was the single decision or non-decision that put Cendril on this path?
Yeah, I think with any scenario like this, it should trigger some retrospectives in all areas. How could we improve the offboarding, people process, access controls? As I mentioned earlier, should we have cut access to certain systems earlier? And your offboarding should be a phased approach, so you can still hand things off, but I don't know. When I've left company, I've been working to the last minute, but a lot of people the last week is kind of goodbyes. I mean, schedule some one-on-ones, and so how could we improve that and even set expectations? As you go through your last 2 weeks, here's what you can expect. because that could potentially improve some things. Maybe it sets some new baselines that everyone should be following, so no other company falls into this. Essentially, once again, the culture. How do we want the culture to evolve?
Yeah.
Because if you go to like a lockdown defensive nature, as if you're working the Pentagon or something, a lot of people aren't going to like that. But there are ways that you could keep it free, open, fully transparent, with increased monitoring and things that better automations and actions that could prevent entire data leakage like what we had.
Well, I have one last question for you. You have spent the past few minutes in the hot seat debating the motives of Jordan, an ex-Star employee, managing a CEO who wants answers before you have them, and staring down competitor features that are uncannily familiar to your own. Does this feel like something that actually happened or something that we invented?
I feel like it's something that happened.
So your final answer, is this real or fiction?
I think it's real.
Real? Here's what I'll say. I know it felt very real, which is the point. The scenario in itself is fictional, but it's built from patterns security leaders are living right now. You yourself would have lived it for super long, especially in AI with the race to ship and the war for senior talent is so high. We're just seeing more and more of these patterns emerge.
Through this whole scenario, I'm like, Uber Waymo, Wiz Orca. It's like there's so many pieces of I was like, is this the Silicon Valley episode?
Now let's do a quick round of off the table, our opportunity to get off the cuff answers on big security questions. What's the single biggest mistake companies make when offboarding trusted employees?
The biggest mistake is thinking that by cutting their single sign-on, it cuts all access. I think time and time again, I've experienced myself when my access has been cut at previous companies when I've left, and or seeing down the line when going through and cleaning up systems like, why is this person's account still here? Of that, thinking that you cut SSO, it cuts it all. Depending on how early of a stage company you are, you might not be paying for the tier that actually gives you control for how long sessions can be or control mobile sessions or whatnot. And so that's the unfortunate bit, which makes it even harder.
How do you build a security culture that treats people as trustworthy and still protects what matters?
For me, it's giving context to everyone to understand, okay, here's our mission. What are the things we care about? Why do we care about them? Give them some examples of impact, and then really prove to them that, hey, we're not here to be the bad person. We want to be partners. I've tried to build organizations that are very technical, so that especially when working alongside probably the closest partner of any security team is engineering, is that you're treated as a peer to them, and not just some security team that they've had bad experiences with in the past. You understand exactly the problems that they're facing, and you can talk the same language. Conversely to that as well, the rest of the organization, which is likely bigger than engineering, being able to talk those languages as well, understand what they're trying to solve as well. Because if you're only focused on a single problem, you haven't built a culture that fits the entire company. You've built one, the small subset. And so I really think it's really just driving home that hey, we're not here to prevent work and make it even harder. If you find a scenario that what we've done is friction, come talk to us. Let's work together and solve it together. And I think that's when you become the approachable security team and people start coming to you versus trying to avoid you and all the things. And it creates that really nice security culture. And do they understand the why and what? And then that really helps you expand your security team, because then everyone's looking for it and become that security champion, if you will.
My last off-the-table question for you is, every security leader has one incident that still makes them shake their head. Something strange, unexpected, or almost too absurd to believe. What's yours, if you can share?
I think it's back to access. You get to a certain size of a company, you've got 400 plus applications in SSO, and you think everything's really great, and you've been spending years building an identity team and identity products internally, and then you get hit with some silly credential exposure from some info stealer from 6 months ago, where this one system that doesn't have anything sensitive in it was accessed by a security researcher, and you go look and it has SSO on it, but it's not enforced, right? And it's kind of just the dumb scenarios that are just they're not dumb because they're serious, but it's one of those where it's I thought we just did an overhaul and we went and looked at everything, but we forgot to mention make sure this one checkbox isn't checked. In my experience, the scenarios in the past where we think, this is going to be a nothing burger, as I call it, have been the ones where like customers are like, what? How did you not tell us? And it's like, this isn't, this is a personal matter, like marketing data or something. It's, and so I think, a scenario around that is one that has been just one of the silliest ones to me, that ultimately it was nothing, but it blew up to be much bigger.
Yeah.
And ultimately, for me, it was actually really insightful, because it's like, wow, we actually had contracts that said we needed to mail notices, like what, and starting having to dig deep into contracts to actually figure out what have we promised before security became a thing as part of this company, for like previous MSAs that preceding the security team, because we just had no idea.
Well, you survived the tabletop. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. This was great.